Book Buzz, HarperCollins Book Buzz. Check it out. Do-do-do, Book Buzz, HarperCollins Book Buzz. Brought to you by Library Love Fest.
Surprise!
Hello, where are we?
I don't know.
Lainey and I are at the HarperCollins building, sitting side by side, like we could touch each other.
What if it was just split screen and you couldn't? This is the first time we've been together for a Galley Club or Facebook Live, I think.
Since you started working.
Almost.
Hello, everyone. How are you? So we have welcome to the second installment of the July Galley Club program. 2 weeks ago, we announced the selection for Galley Club, and we hope that you're downloading, we hope that you're reading On the Rooftop by Margaret Wilkerson Sexton. And today we have with us Miriam Parker, VP Associate Publisher, and Sara Birmingham, Senior Editor, and they're going to talk to us about this remarkable book. So Sara and Miriam, come on. Hi.
Hello. Thank you so much for having us.
So great. Can I, before we start, who sings the like little jingle at the beginning? It's very catchy.
Yes. You know, actually, Miriam, I think you once asked me if that was me.
I was wondering that.
I'm super curious. It's really good.
A million years ago, Annie Mazes worked here, and she had a friend who still is in the biz. He writes songs and he sings, and so she said, "Do you want me to see if Timmy can write us a song for $300?" I'm like, "Okay." So Timmy, whoever Timmy is, we have used that.
Timmy.
Is it? It's great. It's really great. So that's who did it.
I feel like it's in keeping, like knowing that is in keeping with this book. So I just wanted to ask.
Oh yes,
True.
well, a book about music and motherhood and sisterhood and gentrification. There's so much to talk about in this book. Thank you both for coming on and talking to us and to librarians about On the Rooftop. And okay. This is just a very easy conversation where we're going to fill in some of the blanks and encourage librarians to check it out if they haven't already read it, and come next Tuesday with your questions, because the author will be on Facebook Live to talk to us about her book. So they still got plenty of time to read it, but I'm going to turn this over to Miriam and to Sara to just give, without any spoiler alerts, because we promised we won't do spoiler alerts until the author comes on, and then too bad. I hand it over to you. Tell librarians what they need to know, what they should know about this book.
Oh, wow. It's really hard for me to even think and talk about this book, which maybe makes me a bad guest off the get-go, but there's just so much in this book. There's so many ways in, which is maybe for a librarian, something helpful to know. Is I feel like there's all different kinds of readers who would love something about this book On the Rooftop, which I have with me and can't stop staring at many hours a day when I'm at my desk. So this, like you said, this is the mother-daughter story. The matriarch of the family's name is Vivian, and she has these 3 daughters who are just kind of becoming adults, named Esther, Ruth, and Chloe. And it's been Vivian's dream for them that they be the singing girl group. That's what she wanted for herself, to be a performer, and she didn't make it. And she's kind of passed that dream along to them. But she doesn't realize that that might not be exactly what they want for themselves. And they're kind of just in the process of figuring out what their own dreams are. So this is a book that's like so much about those generational differences in perspective and the kind of sometimes tough and sometimes rewarding process of being able to articulate who you are to the people that you care about and having to deal with whatever the fallout of that may be. And it's like you said, it's set in San Francisco in the 1950s. They're in the Fillmore neighborhood, and they're without any spoilers, they're seeing some people around town who are kind of knocking on doors and asking who owns the houses, and they're starting to feel like, is the neighborhood changing? What's going on here? And that carries through the book as well. So it's very much about the idea of home, things changing under your feet, and the like process of renegotiating who you are and who you are with and want to be with in the world when things get tough. So that I just loved off the bat, like watching all these characters. They all feel so like you feel like you know them like the back of your hand. You feel like you're kind of in the family with them. And like I cried at least once in each of their sections, if not multiple times, because they just have such like moving character arcs that they go through. But that's just me. Miriam may have a whole other different set of things that she loves.
Well, it's funny because there's also such a joyous book. Like, I mean, it's a book, like, it's so fun to read, and it's about music and like these family dynamics. And also, I mean, it's about, the daughters' relationships with their mothers and like all the different ways that a daughter can disappoint her mother, or all the different ways that a daughter can, bring her mother joy. And so I don't know, it's one of those books that like, it's that you like sink into, and like you're in the music, you're in the world. And it's so, I love a book that just takes you away. And I think, even though it's a book that'll make you cry, it's also going to make you smile, and it's going to make you want to sing. And like, that's kind of, I just love that about it. It makes it really fun. So there aren't that many books that like, I think are fun anymore. And this one really is.
It's true. It's true. It is a ton of fun. Yeah, there's like all kinds, like you'll feel like you have a gimlet in hand, like in the smoky lounge where they're performing, or like up the book is called On the Rooftop, and that's because that's where the sisters rehearse, is on the roof of their house in San Francisco. They'll be up there kind of belting for the neighborhood to hear. And it's like it's one of those books too where you really feel like you have a sense of the whole neighborhood. It's like, oh, there's that guy who's always walking down the street at this time, and here's that corner shop where this happened. Like you kind of feel like you're just kind of walking around and saying hello to people, and like it's a super lived in feeling to it as well.
What actually that reminded me of is like, there's also like really good food descriptions in this book. I can't remember, one of the sisters is a really good cook. And like, actually, as you're talking, I started remembering the food in the book, and it was making me hungry.
Completely. It's like it's a real book for all the senses. There's music, there's food, there's romance. Like there's a lot of like sensory stuff in this book. And so you're, like you said, you're really like deep in it.
Yeah. And then the other thing that's cool about it, which is sort of like subtle, but sorry, there's a thunderstorm happening outside my window, is that it's loosely based on Fiddler on the Roof, which I think is just so cool, because Fiddler is like one of those musicals that as a child I listened to the album a lot. I did threaten Sara before we got on that I might sing a song, but it's like that also, just like it's not like so obvious, but as if you know that when you're reading it, it also just like tickles all those feelings about that storyline. And obviously, like in Fiddler, it's like mostly a father that the daughters are disappointing, and in this it's a mother, but like I just think it's kind of important also.
Yeah, I mean, it just goes to show like how kind of timeless that story is, because it's like it feels really resonant with how what families still feel like today. And it's like this setting, it's kind of the Bay Area in the 50s following a Black family, like feel really different from the original Fiddler on the Roof. But Margaret, and I'm sure she'll be happy to talk about this when she's on next week, but she just grew up watching the Fiddler on the Roof movie and listening to the music nonstop, and it was just sort of really in her head. And I think that she kind of just couldn't stop like mulling over that story, and the characters who she came up with, they capture all of the same really interesting kind of ideas about like tradition versus progress, and what you owe to your family, and you being your own person. That's all there, but the whole kind of settings and everything else feels so fresh. So it's rewarding if you're a fan of Fiddler on the Roof, or if you haven't seen it or have know nothing about it, that you also don't need to.
Right. I love
what-
those kind of things. Oh, sorry, but I just love it
No.
when there's like an inspiration that like it like adds to it, but you don't have to know it in order to like love the book.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a little, it's almost like a little inside baseball, which is fun. And now everybody knows. There's so because you mentioned that, Sarah, I wanted to bring up the behind the book piece that people can find out more about on Edelweiss that the author wrote. And I found that so heartwarming when she talks about, what her mother let her watch when she was a kid, and it could be the craziest stuff, but if there was any sex in it, was like, no, you can't watch any of that stuff. And she talks about Fiddler on the Roof, and when she had her own kids, they're all singing matchmaker. I just love it. I just love that, just the inside skinny on, what's kind of woven through her history and her experience when she's, she's writing the book.
There's that really great line at the end. I can't remember off the top. I think it says, this is what I want the story to do, to carry its readers and their woes elsewhere. And that just really hit me too, of like, she was like, it was the pandemic and I just like needed to write something more fun. And so I think that energy and that behind the book is like, I get it. I get what you're coming here and writing for all of us to enjoy.
Yeah, carrying your woes elsewhere is definitely what this book will do. I feel like, every time I read this book, editing it and on submission and everything, it was just like, it never felt like work. Like I always find it rewarding to work on books that, it's a lot of concentration and stuff. But in this, I was like sitting alone, smiling to no one, like as I'm like editing. So actually a pretty unique experience in that way. It's just like you can't help but just feel kind of buoyed by it when you're reading.
Can you talk about the relationship that, we were talking before about when the manuscript came in, and this is the first time that you've worked with Margaret. And so can you talk a little bit about how the manuscript was presented and where you went from there with it?
Yeah. I knew of Margaret when this book came in on submission because she's such, her previous two books have been so well respected. She's a National Book Award longlister, and so she really, like, I knew her to be someone who would have like real writing chops, and that was definitely true. And what was so interesting about this book, immediately like reading it for the first time when it came in, it was like so it felt so fresh to me. The characters, like, you fall in love with them right away. That was always there. That quality was always there. And the world of this show business world, I thought was so compelling and interesting. You're kind of watching them kind of make their way from the tiniest little, like, thrown together ad hoc performances and trying to kind of make it big. And seeing all the mechanisms of that was so cool to be swept up in. But it's been so great to work with Margaret because the book has actually changed quite a lot during the editorial process, and she's been like a dream author to work with for me. Absolutely, like a career highlight for me to work on this book with her. When the book started, so I won't get into any spoilers, but we've been talking about how there's a mother and each of the three daughters. And when in the original draft of the book, the mother was very much Vivian, the main character. We were following her for like the vast majority of the time. And each daughter had one section that was theirs in their voice throughout the book. So it would be like you're mostly in Vivian's head, and then you see Ruth, and then it moves back to Vivian, and you never hear from Ruth directly again. And it did that one time for each of them. And to Margaret's, Margaret sort of was so good at writing these little these one-off sections that I selfishly had this feeling of like, but I want to see what they're doing the whole time. Like when this happens later on, I want to know how Esther feels, and like, what about here? Wouldn't Chloe and like Vivian have some kind of like, confrontation about this? Like I wanted to see how everyone would kind of develop and grow over the course of the book, and to like get to spend more time with them and to feel all of their lives kind of intersecting more. And so when we first talked, we kind of bounced some ideas around about how that could look. And it's always a little intimidating if you're making some kind of big suggestions that will involve a lot of work for someone, or involve them having a really open mind. But Margaret was just immediately like, oh my God, like, yes, like I love that. And we were just kind of bouncing ideas off of each other and talking about how different things might work. And it was it was so much fun to brainstorm with her about how the threads could weave together and how the plot could like accommodate more perspective. And so we really hit it off, and she was so game for just having someone else take another look and make some big suggestions. And she absolutely just took everything that I said and completely like elevated it and made it feel organic to the story and organic to her. So it's not some kind of like tacked on, oh, this clearly was written at the end and just thrown in here. It's like she really like absorbed everything bone deep, and the whole book just feels like it was all, to me, like it was always meant to be this way now. So it was just so much fun and so rewarding every step of the way to work with someone like her, who's like really, really into the collaborative process of editing, and also can just take anything you give her and take it to the next level and make it better than you could have ever suggested yourself.
Yeah, it's funny because I read it at the beginning, and then I just read it again, like when it was finished. And like it's so seamless that I forgot that that's how it was to begin with. Like I didn't remember, like until you told that story just now, like I didn't remember that. Like I remember when we read it on Submission, I was like, I love this. And then I'm like, okay, here we go. And then I just read it again, and I completely like, so it's so, I mean, you guys like just did such a good job, because having read it twice, I completely forgot that. So amazing.
That's the best case scenario. And that's all Margaret, because it's really hard to recreate to maintain a consistent style and feel, and to make each character feel as kind of, Vivian had been in her head for a long time as the narrator of this book. And when you're starting to flesh out other characters and give them more room on the page, you don't want them to feel like, oh, they're only sort of half as fully fleshed out as the other ones. And I think she just has such a character-driven writer that I'm sure there are things that she knows about all of these characters, all of their backstories and all of their futures, like in her head, that probably we're only even seeing a fraction of it on the page. That's just my guess.
That's so cool.
That is so interesting.
I will say, like, I know as a writer, like the things that you add on kind of towards the end of the process are the things that you're just like, oh, I'm not sure, but like, she's obviously so like, she just did such a good job of it. So it's so cool that's the story behind it.
So it's kind of like, I mean, you've got the story of this mother and these daughters, and this trajectory, and the setting is so great. And then how as they get older, things are, they're starting to develop, minds of their own and what they want to do with their lives. And then you've got this whole subset, well, not really a subset. I mean, the backdrop of this is 1950s gentrification, this section of California and San Francisco. So can you just talk about that a little bit, and what, how these two stories kind of go together?
Yeah. It's interesting because it's like, as a book that's kind of operating on one level, there's the things that happen in the community, and then there's the things that are happening to the family, and then there's the things that are happening to the individual, and they're all kind of playing off of each other throughout the whole novel. And so what's happening in the neighborhood is, this is the family's been living there for a long time. Vivian, the mother, was originally from New Orleans, but the family's always been in San Francisco. And they have their neighbor next door, who's like a second mother to the girls. They have all of the kids, like the other families down the block who've always been there. They've been surrounded by a lot of the same people for a long time. Without any spoilers, like some of the other people in the neighborhood who are also being affected by this come to be very important to some of the girls specifically. One of the daughters falls in love with someone else in the neighborhood, and so their fates are kind of both tied up in what happens to their family homes, and also the shared history that they have from just being in such close proximity to each other their whole lives. And then also there's this, it's kind of a when it rains, it pours situation that happens so much in life, where there's some tensions that are starting to brew in the family where Vivian feels like I've sacrificed so much for the daughters to have this real shot, and they're so talented as performers, and she knows that they can make it, and she's given everything. She's their manager, she's their booker, she's their conductor, like she's designing their costumes, she's everything to them as performers. And so when they're have this point early on in the book where they might have their big break, like they might have someone back them who could really take them to the next level. And that's the moment where the daughters they have some secrets from their mom that she doesn't know about that are going to have to come to the surface one way or another, because it affects the whole trajectory of their career. And as that's happening is when they're also starting to hear the neighborhood is maybe going to be deemed a blight by the city. And then a lot of changes are going to happen around clearing everyone out, rebuilding. There's a lot of pressure that's coming from above at the same time. So it's sort of like what's happening with the gentrification plot is another level of pressure on a family that's already experiencing some growing pains and some changes. And so it kind of raises this question of, well, do we even want to all stay here together? Like, what is our home? What is it? You know, what are we each looking for in the future? Do we all need to be under the same roof anymore? Should we go our separate ways? So it's the gentrification element kind of brings a lot of those things that they had been avoiding discussing to the surface, and they kind of have no choice but to deal with them.
And I think it's so cool, like when you learn about, I mean, I feel like gentrification and redlining is something that we talk a lot about, and it's like in the news, and we talk about like the history of, you know, especially Black neighborhoods and like value of homes and things like that. But like when you reading a novel that has that as a subplot, like I think really it teaches you something that you aren't learning from news stories, like the real experience of this happening. And like, I think that that's something that's what one of just a thing that's great about novels is it really like, it gives you that empathy. It shows you what it's really like to go through these experiences until you go through them with these characters and you feel for them and you understand those issues, I think, just so much more viscerally. And Margaret does such an amazing job of weaving that in and making it so that you really, really understand, you know, the impact that these kinds of decisions make on people's actual lives.
It becomes nuanced. Like it's not just a yes or no, like black and white. Is this good or bad? Should we take this city to a new plane? But it's nuanced when you get,
Yeah, definitely. You feel like you see how all the dominoes start to fall. It's like all the small things that add up to a neighborhood really changing. Like you can see them kind of play out in her book. And there's obviously like a very real history behind this in this neighborhood in San Francisco. And she's not super beholden to like everything happened on this timeline and in this exact way. She's more like drawing inspiration from the history, but absolutely like all of these city planning policies, the neighborhood being deemed like a blight and all of that is real. And so she gives you like a way in to really understand what that experience felt like.
Early on in the book, there were a couple of lines that I was copying and pasting and looking at them and going back to what you were saying about, you know, like the woman who's the good friend and who's always there, and then her son, and then like you know, there's all these people and they're sort of family. They're just, you know, and meshed in each other's lives and become part of each other's lives. And she says, when she moves from Louisiana, she begged Ellis, Vivian had begged Ellis to move her from Louisiana after a Klansman smashed her bedroom windows with shotguns and dragged her daddy to his death. Ellis had been her boyfriend then, but as soon as they crossed the state line, he'd married her, given her 3 children, then died, and she grieved. But her neighbors carried over stews and roasts and potatoes and string beans. If it hadn't been for them, she wouldn't have made it. Yeah.
And that's like, there are other flashbacks in the book too of the neighbor coming down and checking on the girls while they're asleep and while Vivian's out working as a nurse. And like you really see like a lot of acts of community and like solidarity and love among not just the family, but like everyone around them. There's, you know, when one of the big places in the book is actually a bookstore that's been there for a long time, and one of the daughters works at and loves, and she kind of becomes tied up in, well, how do I protect not just my own home, but this bookstore that I love so much and which has taught me so much. So yeah, for librarians and book lovers, there's a whole extra element there of seeing that space. And there's, you know, the Champagne Supper Club where they perform. Like, there are all of these spots in the community where people kind of band together to fight and protect them, and also where they just go to let off steam and have fun and connect. So you're seeing like the full scope of life happening in these few blocks.
So speaking of other, we have a question.
We do. Pam Gardell wants to know, can you talk about the audiobook? Is there a focus on musical background in the audio version?
That is a great question. I am not sure what specifically the musical treatment is in the audiobook, but I will have to find out, and maybe we can let you guys know.
Yeah, we can always bring it back with Margaret on. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll be a great one in audio.
Yeah,
definitely.
So, so we talked about Fiddler, and we talked about the process, you know, bringing the manuscript one way and then turning it in a different direction, which is such a cool thing, that how well received it was speaks volumes about the author, I think. And the music in the book, which is, and you want to talk a little bit about the music in the book, and then I would love for us to talk a little bit about the jacket and then a couple of other books.
Yeah, that sounds great. The music in the book, well, one thing that we were just talking a little about beforehand, I think Miriam and I might agree on, is that it's really hard to write books about music. Music is something that, like, oftentimes it's hard to put into words what it feels like to listen to it, the quality of it, without getting like super in the weeds or boring or something. A lot of times it's really hard to translate it to the page, but there's a lot of performing and music in this book. And it's like one of those things where when it's done this beautifully, it's like transcendent to read it. You feel moved, like imagining these characters singing songs that you don't even know. It's sort of miraculous how she pulls that off. So the girl group that they form is called The Salvation, and they're very much aspiring to, like, they love people like Billie Holiday, like they're all of these really important kind of people of the day that they love and emulate. And in the book, there are a lot of lyrics where it'll show them singing, and you'll kind of see, like, over the course of the song, like a character is maybe coming to their own realization about something, like the song is kind of helping them process things that are going on. And so you'll see these really great lyrics in the book. And it's one fun fact about those is that Margaret actually wrote, I would say, the vast majority of the lyrics in the book herself. And it's not obvious if you're reading it whether that's the case or not, because they're kind of just presented as though they might have been like a standard of the day. But she actually wrote a ton of them, and I don't know how she did that. It's like a whole other skill set. And it's kind of perfect, because then they'll sort of showcase something that's going on that characters like reckoning with or grappling with, but they're also just really, really beautiful. And I definitely was inventing melodies for them as I was reading along. There are a few, like, you know, kind of spirituals or hymns or things like that they'll also sing. So you will come across some references to real songs in the book as well. But a lot of it is just out of Margaret's own imagination.
Why didn't we have open mic night? Miriam could have sung.
I know. Yeah, Miriam could do the original Fiddler songs and then have Margaret sing what her original.
No, I think you should do what melodies you came up with.
Oh, me, yes.
Well, Sarah's also editing a book about Nina Simone, so, you know.
True.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Stay tuned.
Listen, it's never too late to sing.
I'm really glad we had at least a little real fiddler.
Listen, we're not done yet.
Virginia.
We're not done yet.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the jacket. Can we show the jacket? We'll do it. Lainey's gonna, there we go. Right? Is that being?
Show it even larger. There you go.
Okay. So this is a wild illustration. Do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, this is an illustration by Vivian Lopez-Rowe, who's one of our book designers at Ecco. And immediately when we saw this, I mean, Miriam can attest that everyone was just across the board like, oh, this is the book. Like, this is so fantastic. Yeah, I don't know if Miriam, you want to talk a little bit about your book.
I was thinking back to the process because I think I tell me if I'm wrong, but I think when Vivian showed us options for this cover, she showed us like different elements of this cover on different covers. So there was one that kind of just showed the clouds, and then there was one that kind of just showed the faces. And we were kind of like, well, can we just put it? And then there was one that sort of put it all together, and we were like, yes, we want it all. We want everything. And because she is an extremely talented illustrator, she can do that. So she was able to put together the faces and the microphone and the kind of, you know, like 1950s elements of this that I think just work so well and tell you exactly what this book is about.
Yeah, this is like when we were telling her what we wanted, we're like, okay, so there's like 40 or 50 different elements to this book. So there's no small feat. It's like there's sisters, there's singing, it's San Francisco, it's the 50s, like it's like gentrification, it's a Black family in a changing world. Like there's like so much going on. And this immediately, it's just like looking at this, you're like, this looks like a neon sign outside of a nightclub where you see these young women performing, and you like kind of see them there looking as like joyful as the book makes you feel, and just the central microphone and the clouds and stuff. It just feels like you have this sense of like dreamers who are going for something, and their sense of place, and just loved it right away. And Vivian is an amazing designer. I don't know, it's pretty uncommon to have your book designer also be an illustrator, and to be able to, you know, usually if you have an illustrated cover, and you have to hire a totally different person, and you are directing them. And Vivian is like this powerhouse one-stop shop where she's an incredible designer, incredible illustrator. She did like the hand lettering for this as well, like that's all her. And yeah, the covers that she's done for Ecco are so crazy. We were talking about some of her other ones beforehand that I think Vivian's worked at Ecco for 1 year, and in that time she's made some of our most beloved, like incredible covers. I know, Miriam, maybe you want to refresh them on Remarkably Bright Creatures or some of our other favorites.
Well, I do think that the participants in this Galley Club know Remarkably Bright Creatures so well, and that was, I think, the first cover that she did at Ecco. So it was definitely, and when we saw this cover, we were just like totally wowed by her. But and this story is obviously about a woman who befriends an octopus, and that's, it's not something you could just take a photo of. So I think, again, like, this book has gone on to be a New York Times bestseller, and it's just really is becoming like a beloved story. And I think that this cover is so unique and just doesn't look like anything else. And I have to think that that's part of the reason that's drawing people to this book, because it's just such a special cover. Although, actually, looking at these all together, she does have a color palette that we seem to
yeah, I never would have thought of that. There's like
Orange.
The oranges. Yeah,
And
it's funny because maybe it's us who has a color palette, because she always shows us multiple color options, and we are, I guess, always pick the orange at the end of the day.
So do you want to talk a little bit about these books? I mean, everybody knows now, because of Remarkably Bright Creatures was actually the first book that we selected for the Galley Club program. But do you want to take this opportunity to talk about these other 3 books? They're beautiful on the outside. You want to tell librarians what they're about?
Yes.
On the inside?
That would be great. So this book is, this was a custom portrait that Vivian did of Yvette Dion, who is our author, and she is incredible. She's had a number of hats in publishing. She's just started a new position at Yes, and she used to be the editor-in-chief of Bitch, and she's done all kinds of things. And she's been writing about fatness and Blackness and gender and race, all kinds of things for a long time. She's become really like a go-to voice in pop culture, and she's written a ton about representation in TV and on film, and just kind of one of the people who helps us make sense of how what we're seeing on screen is reflecting our society in some kind of way. And so this is her memoir and essay, and she's kind of going deep for the first time on her own experiences as a fat Black woman. And she's talking about the minefield that fat Black women are kind of forced to navigate, when they're just trying to live their lives. They're going to the doctor's office, at work, on dating sites, growing up in gym class. Like, there's all kinds of angles that she takes to kind of talk about why it is that our society is so obsessed with body size and the reality that is being so swept aside in all of that judgment. So she's pulling in on one page, she'll be talking about this fascinating scientific study about workplace discrimination that you've never heard of and is so eye-opening. And on the next page, she'll be telling a personal anecdote from her own life that will have you laughing out loud. She has this whole section about how when she developed agoraphobia as a teen, and she basically just defected on her life IRL, and she started living as this avatar named Shay on this platform called Habbo Hotel, where she was one of the cool kids, and she wore all the coolest digital outfits and stuff, and she was so popular. So there's hilarious moments, and then there's really sort of a lot of pulling no punches, taking no bullshit. This is how our certain systems, our medical establishment and our schools are kind of reinforcing things that are really harmful. So it's a great blend that will make you think, it will make you laugh, it will make you shed a tear. And you will definitely, whether this is something you've thought about a lot or something that you're thinking about for the first time, you will come away with a kind of opened perspective, I think.
That cover, again, I mean, the cover is gorgeous.
And the cover is so good. I mean, the jumpsuit, the nails, everything was so good.
And
I should say Waitlist is also coming out in December for any librarians who are listening. Night Wherever We Go. But Miriam, do you want to? I feel like I'm talking a lot.
I'm loving listening to you describe them. And actually, you're probably better at it than I am, but Night Wherever We Go is coming out in January of 2023. It's sort of kicking off our 2023, and it's such a good read about a group of enslaved women in Texas who kind of fight, their sort of owners are trying to impregnate them and create another generation of slaves, and they fight back against that. And again, it's just one of these. It's an engaging read, and it's a story about women sort of taking control and empowering themselves against the odds. I mean, they have no power in this world except for the tricks that they can endure and each other and the group, the way that they work together. And so and Sara can talk a little bit more about it, but it's just one of those books that it sticks in your mind, and you root for these characters because you want them, you they're being treated so badly, and you just want them to win,
Yeah. And one thing I think that is so special about this book is Tracy wanted to write this book because she didn't see any books that were really showing enslaved women as full people with completely different ambitions and fears and anxieties and just showing the whole breadth of experience. Usually we see books that are kind of about the institution of slavery, and the actual individuals are maybe an afterthought. And so this is kind of a radically intimate, beautiful book that it's unflinching about the realities of the terrible situations that they're up against, but it's also about the kind of transcendent friendships between them, their dynamics, their romances. There's the full breadth of experience in here. And everyone who reads this book is obsessed with it. Elizabeth McCracken and Kiese Lehman just blurbed, and Rachel Hang, and everyone who touches it just absolutely adores it. I think that there's something so special about this. And this book, she was inspired to write it. We will have an author's note for this one too that I just read. And she came across, was just reading a book and came across like a footnote that took her to another footnote that took her to another footnote about this one plantation that they only had 2 children born there over like decades. And the women were clearly like banding together and using herbal abortificants, which is what these women are doing to keep themselves from having children. And so there's like this history that hasn't been like talked about and explored that she was drawing inspiration from. It's just really, really important and cool. And the book, couldn't recommend it more.
The best stories come from the footnotes, you know, like one little line, it's just like you want to dive into them.
Yeah, and it's so cool when someone actually follows that trail. Like when she told me the whole like bibliography, like you read this page and it mentions this, and then you go to this, but you know, you really have to follow it back to get the stories that have never like been prioritized. So so cool. This is a book that is out, so people can actually read it. It's called Mother Ocean, Father Nation. As you can see, a fantastic Vivian cover. What's so great about this cover is this is another book where it's like there's a lot going on. So you can see these spaces that make up this island. This is a story of a brother and sister who are of Indian ethnicity, and they're living on an island in the South Pacific where the Indian population is a minority. And they were brought there by the British as indentured servants, and now the British have left. And there's a coup underway, and the Indian community is suddenly finding themselves the victims of increasing racial persecution, and things are starting to get scary. And so the brother J. Paul and the sister Bhumi, they've had a childhood that's under the thumb of their father. They haven't had always the best relationship. And this is about what happens to them when one of them is forced to leave and one of them is forced to stay. And you kind of see the paths that they take and the way they kind of find their way back to each other and develop a meaningful relationship with each other at the moment where they're actually being forced apart for the first time. So it's really beautiful, like fascinating history. The author is a historian based on the real history of Indian indenture in the British Empire. And but also like it's a real family story. It sounds like kind of heady, but it's very much about their day-to-day experiences of the brother is closeted, he's bisexual, and there's this like underground queer community on the island that he's a part of. The sister is like really passionate about botany, and she's like studying all the plants around her wherever she goes. So it's, even though there's a lot of kind of big ideas and big political stuff happening in this book, is very much about like that brother-sister relationship and what ties them together.
Yeah, and I think it's really a book about characters who like are sort of out of place in their environment. And like for anyone who's ever felt like, you know, like the one who like, you know, everyone's staring at, or like, you know, like who just doesn't quite fit in, like both of them don't quite fit in ways that I think, as you know, like I really identified with. I especially loved Bhumi, the sister. You know, she moves to San Francisco and she's like trying to study and go to school and like make money. And it's just, she's just a character that if you are like a reader and a like lover of learning, you cannot help but identify with. She's so great. And she, I mean, for me, she was the one she really carried me through the story of like, I was just like, I just love this girl. And I just, again, like you want her to make it, you know, and you also love the relationship that sort of long distance develops between these siblings that isn't there at the beginning. So it's a really good story about family and like figuring out who you are.
Beautiful. Well, that's quite the palette. A literary palette and an arresting visual palette.
Yes,
it's really cool.
Vivian Rowe is the artist name, one more time for anyone who is a fan. She's just such a star.
Yeah. That, I mean, when we first did Remarkably Bright Creatures, one of the questions that people kept asking was, where did that artwork come from? So pretty neat. Well, the time has flown, and I feel like we've gotten so much information about you know, the story behind the story, which is always so interesting, and some great talking points about the book as well for those who haven't read it yet. We really do encourage people to read it, because then you can be part of the conversation when the author comes on next Tuesday. Do we have any more questions? Are we good?
No, just a comment. It would be cool to have a movie version with a soundtrack created for all the songs for this for On the
Yes.
Rooftop. Like, yes, please.
I totally agree. That's my dream. Like, I feel like this is such a movie. Someone's got to make it. So
I keep thinking about Destiny's Child, like with like
Yes.
like the three kind of like not, I know they're not all sisters, but like like singing together. Like,
Like
I'm like,
Dream
you know
Girls.
what? I like Solange like needs to, or
yeah, Lainey, Dreamgirls is always the thing on my mind too. I'm like, can Jennifer Hudson play Vivian, the mom? Like,
yes.
it just feels like it needs to happen. So I really hope we see that day.
Cool. Start a petition. I'll sign.
Amazing.
Well, I guess if there aren't any other, like we've got the questions, we've got the comments, we'll be sharing this again as soon as we hang up, and folks will be chiming in and checking this out and hearing what you both have said today, which has been really enlightening and really entertaining.
They're very excited for all the books that the bonus buzz we had. Everyone was like, that description. I'm so excited. So
That's
Yeah,
so
that was
great.
fantastic. That was fantastic. So, by all means, come back and talk to us more about books, because we love to hear from editors and publishers about the books that have set their hearts aflutter. We could do it all day long, but it's certainly nice for people to hear from folks other than ourselves.
I think there's e-galleys available already for waitlist, and maybe the Tracy Rose Payton, it'll be imminent if it's not
Imminent.
already.
Yeah.
So coming soon to an Edelweiss near you.
Believe me, they'll be looking, right? Okay. Well, Miriam,
you.
VP Associate Publisher, Sara Birmingham, Senior Editor of this wonderful book. Oh, I can't wait for us to talk to the author now too.
yeah.
That's going to be super great. On the Rooftop, Margaret Wilkerson Sexton. She's going to be on next Tuesday, but look at her. She's beautiful. I can't wait to talk to her.
She's the
And
best.
these characters and this storyline, it's deep. I love when you said, Sara, that like, there's probably a ton of things about each character that she has in her head that didn't,
I think so. You'll have to
Yeah,
ask.
yeah. Thank you both so much for taking the time to speak with librarians and with us about this book. And we so appreciate all your support and everything that you do to put some really stellar books on shelves in libraries from Ecco's list. Just such great books. So thank you both.
Thank you so much. This is my first time doing it, and we love librarians more than anything at Ecco. So it's just thank you for giving us a chance to chat. It's really fun.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you so much for having us and for spreading the word about our books.
All right, now take us out with a little zibba dibba zibba zibba dibba zibba dibba doo. You're not gonna do it.
All day long, I biddy biddy rum. If I were a wealthy man.
Hey!
Beautiful.
Go on tour, Virginia, you and me.
Oh my God, I'm so excited.
Oh, you just need a Vivian there to get you some gigs.
That's right.
It's true.
Oh, the
All
best.
right.
Love it. All right, you.
Bye.
Take good care, both of you. Be well. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.